And I know it was announced last week that two former Dolphins are now semi-finalists in the veterans part of the Hall of Fame, up in Mark Clayton and Bob Kuechenberg. I was looking at Clayton's stats, and from a touchdown perspective, man, he's got just as many touchdowns as some guys who are in the Hall of Fame and fewer, and he played in like 80 less games or like 100 less games. He doesn't have the receptions and stuff, so for him it might be tricky, but Bob Kuechenberg as well, Seth, has a chance. I know he was a finalist, I think, between 02 and 09, so he was knocking on that door for many years when he was alive. You think either one of those guys here might get a shot here to get into the Hall of Fame with this second veterans path, as they say?
Yeah, the seniors.
Seniors, yeah.
There. It's an interesting deal. Both are certainly worthy of the conversation. I feel it's almost criminal that Mark Clayton isn't already in the Hall of Fame. I don't, when you talk about those numbers, Mark Clayton put those numbers up from 1984 to 1990, whatever. I mean, it was just a different league back then. And so to look at it, you can't just look at the numbers and compare them. This is a guy who led the league in touchdowns twice. This is a guy that the first time he led the league in touchdowns, he had 18 touchdowns, which was an all-time record. He set an NFL record with 18 touchdowns in 1984. Only two people other than Mark Clayton, only two other people in the history of this league had 18 or more touchdowns in a season, and their names happen to be Jerry Rice and Randy Moss, first ballot guys. And Mark Clayton is just sniffing the seniors committee semifinalists for the first time in his life. I have a hard time understanding that. For some reason, he was penalized for the fact that his quarterback was Dan Marino, which I don't get either. How about the fact that he had that kind of production and rewarded the talent of Dan Marino with that kind of production, while he had another guy on the that was an all-pro talent on the other side of him. We're seeing now that that you got the guys from the Rams, right? I mean, Isaac Bruce is in, and you got the Torrey Holt and Marvin Harrison, and Peyton Manning's receivers. Yeah. So those guys aren't penalized for having great quarterbacks. I don't understand why Mark Clayton is penalized for it. So I think there's a lot of things at play. But the fact that he, for the first time ever, is now in that conversation, I think is a big deal. I think they only choose one. So, there's a lot of worthy candidates.
It's three. Three to get they pick
one of our guys
to go on as finalists, then they pick
one.
But
I think only
one of our guys, though. We only get one of our guys.
Right?
Yeah.
Only one will get that gold jacket. And I mean, man, I think that, and you could say this, when guys reach this stage, there's probably a lot of fan bases that are saying a lot of guys that their time is overdue. But man, oh man, I mean, what Mark Clayton was doing, Dan Marino, Mark Clayton, Mark Duper kind of reinvented offensive football. I mean, they really did. 48 touchdowns in 1984. It was just unheard of. We see it all the time. Everyone says, what would Dan Marino do in this day and age with this set of rules? Would he throw for 6,000 yards? Mark Clayton was a big part of that. He was the number one reason, or at least the number one reason. Dan Marino was the number one reason. Dan Marino was great. But as far as that supporting cast, Mark Clayton was the guy. And I don't understand why it's taken this long. I'm thrilled for him that he's in the conversation. And this is not to diminish the validity of Bob Kuechenberg being in that conversation either. But I just believe in my heart of hearts that Mark Clayton was a Hall of Fame talent.
Here's some stats, too, because I looked it up. Mark Clayton played in 158 games, had 84 touchdowns. Andre Reed played in 234, had 87 touchdowns. Charlie Joyner, all around, these are all guys from the same era, because you can't look at, Rice and Moss. That's a whole different game. Charlie Joyner had 87 touchdowns in 239 games. And Art Monk, look, I love Art Monk from Syracuse. That's my guy, Syracuse guy. 224 games, 68 touchdowns. Those guys are all in the Hall of Fame. Mark Clayton played 80 less games and has as many touchdowns as those guys.
Think about that. It's obscene.
Crazy.
Yeah. It's obscene.